Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Motion Project podcast. My name's Kimi. I'm here with Wolf. How are you, mate?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm back at
Yeah,
uni, which is fun and already stressful. Overall, going well. How was the move back?
stressful too. A lot
Yeah.
of things to do in a short period of time, but
Mm,
yeah, we managed well. Still
yeah.
struggling with the jet lag, but everything went okay.
Yes. So nice.
So, last week we talked about basics of resistance training, like 101.
Yeah.
And today we decided to move a little bit further about health. And we would like to talk about how resistance training benefits or helps in bone density, which is an important topic. But first, we should start with our weekly week of movement section. So, how was
Yes.
your week?
Look, to be honest, I think we said we were going to do this every fortnight, but then obviously life gets in the way, and here we are 3 weeks later. I've actually had a really good 3 weeks of movement, not having uni, so I was able to put a bit more attention to my exercise. And so I've been working on my goal of the 100 kilo squat for 10 reps and the
Yeah.
40-minute 10K. And I realized I think the squat is going to be easier than the
Then the
run.
run?
Yeah, I lost a bit of fitness after Ballarat half, and and didn't run toward the end of last semester. So that is taking a while to get back. In terms of
Yeah.
the squat, I've managed to hit 92.5 kilos for 10 reps, which I'm really happy with. And I think it's all starting to click. So I imagine with another 6 weeks of training or so, we'll be talking. We'll be feeling
Yeah,
a lot better. So
that's
I'm
right.
hopeful. I think I've picked out a race for the 10K. Um, and I'm just trying to work out if I need a bit more time. So there's a race on the 21st of October
Okay.
called Run Pre in Melbourne, and I think that
Okay.
could be a good option.
To have your final test or your
Yeah,
like a
to have my
trial?
final test.
Final test.
To have my
Okay.
final
Okay.
test.
Are you thinking about running before that?
Yeah. Um,
Okay.
sorry, what was that?
See, if you're
Dropped out.
thinking about running before that, like having another race or that's it in October.
No, I'm thinking of just that one.
Okay.
Hopefully my training will indicate where I'm at, and if yeah, I'll push it back if my training doesn't get a lot better, but even just this week I've felt like it's stepped in the right direction.
Okay.
Everything's starting to click a bit more, body's feeling good.
Hmm.
How about you going? What have you got up to in terms of movement over the last little bit?
Not that much. Actually, I just walk a lot.
Yeah,
I visit my family in Santiago, so
yeah.
I went walking a little bit. And before that, the last thing or the last activity I did was I went to the Dandenong National Park,
Oh
and
yes.
yeah, I took the 1,000 steps trial,
Yeah.
and I went with a friend, and we walked like, okay, I
12K
was pretty
uphill.
sore. Yeah, it was a lot, a lot.
Uphill.
I was pretty sore after the trail,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was enough. And after that, I went with you to kick the footy. So yeah,
Yeah. That was fun.
yeah,
I still
really fun.
maintain that if you had played footy in Australia, you would have been an absolute weapon. No doubt. You'd have been best player on
Thank you
the
for that.
pitch. No, of
Thank you for that.
course. Good set of hands, good catches, good marks, as we say in AFL. I reckon, yeah, yeah. Full forward, one out in the square. Kimmy for most valuable player, without a doubt.
MVP. Thank you, mate.
MVP, winning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably.
Okay.
I think it's too hard. Like it's too rough.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm like AFL material. It's rough.
It is a bit
Yeah,
rough.
yeah.
Um, I don't know if you saw. Oh, did you see the game against North Melbourne?
No, just a clip
Not
of
North
the,
Melbourne, the
the
game
last
against
minute. No,
Melbourne.
I haven't seen the full. game, just the clips from the last, like, I think 6 minutes or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah.
Like, yeah,
It was incredible.
everyone was so crazy about the game.
Yeah. Sorry, that was the game against Melbourne, not North Melbourne. But yeah, Melbourne, incredible. Nazaya went crazy. I've converted Kimmy to being a Saints fan,
Yes, I am.
which is really sad for her, really, because Saints are terrible.
But we had a really good time watching the game, so I'm happy with that.
Yeah, yeah, we had fun, definitely.
So, back in our topic, last week we talked about resistance training, and now we want to talk about how resistance training impacts bone density. So, let's start with what is bone density?
So, yeah, bone density is essentially a way of measuring bone strength. And specifically, bone mineral density is how much mineral, and in the case of bone, it's calcium phosphate, is packed into a bone. So, they measure this with a DEXA scan where they take kind of like a 2D image of the bone, of the cross sectional area, and they have a look at how much mineral content there is in that cross sectional area versus how much it weighs. So the area of the bone divided by its weight. Now, the structure of bone is kind of important for later on when we talk about how to improve it. But there's cortical bone, which is kind of a harder bone and it's on the outside of bones. And that is kind of made up like concentric circles stacked within each other. So if you imagine a straw and you pack heaps of straws in,
Yeah,
that's cortical bone.
yeah,
And this type of bone is really good at absorbing force in one direction, so kind of impact. Then there's another type of bone called trabecular bone, which is more of a spongy bone. If you imagine kind of a lattice of kind of rods and plates that make up the bone, and they're really
yeah,
good at absorbing force in kind of multiple directions. And this will really impact exercise prescription because we need to load in different ways. Spoiler
yes,
alert. So there are two things when looking at kind of things that influence bone strength, and that is the structure, which is the size and the shape of the bone. But then there's, which we don't necessarily have a lot of control over. Like that is
yeah,
often determined by genetics. If you've got a bigger bone and you're taller, you'll probably have stronger, big, greater bone mass. But bone density is kind of more important, and that's influenced by composition, which is kind of the amount of cortical and trabecular bone there is within the bone.
yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the brief
Okay.
rundown on bone density.
Perfect. So we decided to talk about bone density because exercise has a way to modify bone density. And why it's important? Because when you're getting older, you can get a metabolic bone disease called osteoporosis that is characterized by bone density loss, and the quality of the bone is also affected, and that increases the risk of fractures. Most people already know that there's like a primary osteoporosis, which is related to a decrease in estrogen in women. After the menopause, women has a decrease in estrogen, and that is increases the signaling for bone destruction, so that decreases bone density. But there's also a secondary osteoporosis, which is related to sedentarism and lack of physical activity. And that's why we think this is important. Osteoporosis is the result of the imbalance between the formation and destruction of the bone.
Mm.
And as I was saying, estrogen depletion and also oxidative stress are the two most important mechanisms behind osteoporosis.
Okay.
Let's talk about what happened over the lifespan with bone density.
Yeah. And I think you've touched on a little bit kind of towards the end of the lifespan there. But really, what influences the end of the lifespan with kind of osteoporosis is what happens a little bit earlier on and what happens throughout the life. So that we know about 20 to 40% of adult peak bone mass, and I know that's a different term to bone density, but it's still kind of related, is determined by lifestyle choices. And physical activity is generally a class A kind of recommendation. So there's a good amount of evidence for the positive effect it has on bone density. So early on during childhood, bone accretion or laying bone down occurs quite slowly and steadily. But when you
Yeah.
hit puberty, the increase in primary sex hormones causes a rapid increase in the bone mineral accretion. And it's at this point that physical activity presents as an opportunity to really increase that bone mineral density. So we find that around a 10% higher peak bone mass in early and young adulthood could delay the development of osteoporosis by around 13 years and reduce the risk of lifetime fracture by 15%. So it's this idea of banking bone and having, I think we talked about it briefly on the first
Yeah,
episode,
last
but
week. Yeah,
yeah, having a saving account and making sure earlier on in childhood you're doing exercise and loading the bones up so that peak bone mass is a little bit higher. So it really aligns with the primary sex hormones. They kind of are peaking during early adulthood, puberty, and they start to decline from there. Basically, once you reach the age of 30, most people have reached peak bone mass. So it's
yeah.
really about from then on
uh,
maintaining the amount.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So once you reach like late 40s for women and
Mm,
early 40s for men,
mm,
bone density start to decline.
yeah.
That's what happens. So if you increase your physical activity during childhood and during that peak of hormones, you will have a lot of money in the to
Mm,
avoid that decline, like abrupt decline during when you're
yes.
getting older.
Yeah.
There's population that is at high risk of developing osteoporosis. So women post menopause,
Hmm.
men with low testosterone levels, also low vitamin D levels, and another diseases like hypothyroidism, and when people are
Mm,
using glucocorticoids in a chronic way. Like if you have a autoimmune disease and your doctor prescribe glucocorticoids, that could be a risk of you developing further osteoporosis.
mm.
So I think it's worth mentioning that if you're having that kind of diseases, you should talk about like complementing your therapy with physical activity to avoid those consequences.
Yes, very true. And I guess it'd be also good to have a look then about how, kind of on a physiological level, how exercise actually forces bone adaptation.
Yeah, so basically, bone is like a structure that lives under a balance between bone formation
Mm,
and bone destruction. So the
mhm,
body will try to keep that equilibrium, but there are some mechanisms that could increase
mhm,
bone density because the bone is a structure that can respond to mechanical stress.
mm,
So there's two types of cells. You have cells that build bone, they're the osteoblasts, and cells that destruct or resorb bone, which are the osteoclasts. So they're like fighting to keep the bone steady in a steady state. That is called
yeah,
homeostasis. Okay, so
yeah,
when you're under mechanical stress, you can regulate bone formation. These bone cells will be able to sense that mechanical strain and put on some chemical signs that will promote growth of the bone. So those cells are able to translate those signals and start constructing or creating more bone. And
yeah.
that is how resistance training is linked. Because
Mm,
when you put compression, tensile forces to a bone, that bone will respond with
mhm,
the building of more bone and you will
yeah,
increase your bone density.
yeah.
In a summary is
So
that.
yeah, and I think it's worth noting with the osteoclasts, it's not to think of them as something that's necessarily bad. So the osteoclasts are the things that reabsorb bone, destroy bone, but actually what they're doing, their function is to remove old bone and so that new bone can be laid down. But
Yeah.
if
So like the
yeah,
defective or like bone that is not working well, they took all the garbage out. So they took
yeah,
like destruct or yeah. It's
if
not
they're working
destructive.
yeah, if they're working too strongly though, and there's not enough kind of osteoblast activity, then that's when we can see that homeostasis or those levels shift towards bone reabsorption.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So every time we have to manage a balance between those two forces that are trying to
yeah,
build
yeah,
and get rid of bone.
yeah,
If we put a strain, a mechanical stress that will promote bone formation,
yeah.
it will also decrease the activity of bone resorption, and you will increase your bone density.
I think something really interesting with bone reabsorption and bone remodeling is that you kind of like the easiest way of thinking about this in terms of bone reabsorption is like a use it or lose it kind of situation where if you imagine what we see about people who are in casts for a long time, or bedridden, they actually have
Yeah.
quite large drops in their bone mineral density just because don't have that mechanical strain going through the bones, which promotes kind of remodeling. So I
Yeah.
think, yeah,
Yeah, a lot of studies are like viewing what happens on the lumbar spine
yeah,
and the femur, things like
yeah,
that, under sedentary or after an injury that
yeah,
has a lot of time in bed rest. And yeah, bone density decreases a lot
hmm,
during those periods, and that's also related with the decrease in those tensile and mechanical stress that bones are supposed to have
yeah.
to increase the density.
So there are two kind of loads that are put across a bone. There's kind of impact, which is kind of the forces going directly up the bone, and then there's kind of mechanical load, which is kind of the muscles pulling on the bone.
So
Am I
you have
correct?
so you have compressive. Compressive
Yeah,
is from top to bottom, like a
yeah,
sandwich. You're compressing
yeah,
the bone. That's
yeah,
one. And the tensile one is the one that when the tendons pull the bone out.
yeah,
So you have those two types of stimuli that could increase bone density in those sections of the bone.
yeah, and
Also, you have
that relates to the structure of the bone.
yeah,
So cortical bone is the bone that really is quite good at absorbing vertical forces, so impact. And trabecular bone is often found at attachment sites and is quite good at absorbing those tensile forces.
yeah. So that's related to the two types of exercise that we need. Tensile through loading, like lifting weights, and
Yeah.
impact, compressive forces like in activities such as jumping or running could
Okay.
be related to that.
Yeah. All right, let's have a look at some of the recommendations for exercise. And for this one, ESSA has a really good position statement on the prevention and management of osteoporosis. So,
Hmm.
firstly, these recommendations are for low risk individuals. So, people who have a normal bone mineral density level and are not a risk factor for falls or fracture. So, I think that's really important to know. If you're concerned about your bone mineral density, it's worth going and chatting to your GP before beginning exercise. So, these are for people with normal mineral density. So the ESSA recommendations are broken into two categories, and that's impact loading and then resistance training. What is really important for impact loading is the magnitude, so how great the intensity is, the rate, so how fast that loading's occurring, and the direction. So the intensity, we're looking for about greater than 4 times body weight. At the rate, that is kind of determined by the activity. And so this will be more kind of you're running, you're jumping, you're hopping. And then direction, just making sure we're loading those patterns, not always in a linear fashion, but kind of approaching the exercise from a different angle. Frequency wise, we're looking for about 4 to 7 days per week. And generally, the sets and reps are 50 jumps per session, and that can be broken up into 3 to 5 sets of about 10 to 20 reps, 1 to 2 minutes rests between. Practically, this can be broken up throughout the session. Um, and so you can jump between kind of doing your squat and then putting in a bit of impact loading and then going back to more resistance training. yeah, as I previously mentioned, kind of the types of activities we're looking up are jumping, bounding, hopping, skipping rope, doing drop jumps, so stepping off a box and then jumping up after that. That's kind of the things you could do in a gym, but are there any other ways that we could
Yeah,
do
you can
floating?
you can also in the gym you can use trampoline.
Yep.
I work with some older adults that were working on that, like just hanging from the bar and using the trampoline to as a stimuli.
Yep. Yep.
And well, if you're 30, 40s and you want to start doing some social sports,
Mm.
that's good. Yeah. Anything like futsal, basketball, volleyball, anything that involves a little bit of jumping, change of directions could be really good for your bones.
Yes. Yeah. I guess that's that, yeah, change of direction and not applying the bone, not applying the load in the same direction every time. In terms of the resistance training, some of the important things are it's still the same recommendations of 2 days per week in line with the kind of broader recommendations, but the intensity is a little bit higher. So, generally, for bone remodeling and to get that mechanical load through the bone, you need higher intensity. So, it's about 80 to 85% of your 1 rep maximum. Um, and just to confuse all of you who were listening last week, they've used a different RPE scale. They've used the Borg 6 to 20 RPE scale. And so for 80 to 85% of 1 RM kind of correlates with a greater than 16 RPE. I think it is worth noting that that is probably going to be too great for a lot of um, beginners and novice resistance trainers. So starting a bit lower, there are recommendations of starting around 50%, and you can always build to working up to 80, 85% of 1 RM. In terms of the sets and reps, 2 to 3 sets of about 8 repetitions are the recommendations. And then really targeting those areas that we see kind of drops in bone mineral density and fractures in older populations. So muscles which attach to the hip and spine, as well as shoulder. So the major muscle, so some of the compound movements would be really good. So a squat and a deadlift because they all attach to the pelvis and the femur, and they also work the trunk. So attaching to the spine there, and then things like your bench press, shoulder press, and rows will help with that kind of humeral head bone density.
Yeah, I didn't mention that, but the most frequent fracture among older adults is the
Mm.
hip. So it's really important to work through that joint.
Mm.
A movement that involve that joint will be benefit bone density. Okay, so that is for this episode. Thank you for listening and see you soon for the next episode of the Motion Project podcast. Thanks.
Looking forward to it. Ciao.
Bye.